My name is Miriam Golden. I'm at the EUI. I want to remind you the event will be recorded. Recordings will be available online, assuming there are no technical difficulties. And we encourage all of you to turn on your videos if you're able to, so that our speaker doesn't feel like she's speaking into black holes on the moon and can see you and interact at least a little bit with you. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Molly Roberts, who has a PhD from Harvard in government and a master's from Stanford University in statistics. She works on text as data and also applies that, which I should say applies that heavily in China, and is really, I think, going to be an inspirational speaker for all of us because there's such deep interest in text as data in Europe. So we will take questions at the end. There'll be 15 or 20 minutes for questions, and we'll ask you to use your raise hand feature. If you put questions in the chat, they might get lost. So actually, if you're able to wait and raise your hand when question time comes, it would be probably better. But you can do either. And so I want to turn it over to Molly and thank her very much for getting up so early in San Diego to come today.
Oh, thanks, Miriam, and thanks for having me, and to Natalia also for organizing. So let me share my screen. Can you guys see that? All right. So good morning from San Diego. So today I'm going to talk about adjusting for confounding using text matching, and this is joint work with Brandon Stewart at Princeton and Rich Nielsen at MIT. And this paper came out last year in the American Journal of Political Science, so you can read more about it online if I don't cover everything here. I'm going to sort of motivate this method with this example of how whether or not gender affects citations in political science. So there's lots of discussion, of course, about the status of women in academia or implicit bias that might affect, how somebody's work is received, et cetera. And we sort of were inspired by this study by Melania Powers and Walter that was written in 2013, which showed, this was published in an international organization that showed that women were cited less than men in international relations. So they looked at this subfield of political science, international relations, and they found that women were cited less than men. And what they did was they looked at about 3,000 articles published in top-tier international relations journals from 1980 to 2006. And they found that women received about 80% of the citations of their male counterparts. And they do a network analysis and suggest that this is in part because women self-cite less than men, and citations come not only from when other people cite you, but also when you cite yourself. And also that men cite men more, and men make up the largest proportion of scholars. So those were the two sort of conclusions that they came to. So this is a really difficult study to do because there are lots of confounders. So if we're looking at the effect of gender or perceived gender on citations, there's a lot of different things that could confound this. And in particular, women might write about different topics, use different words, use different approaches, for example, than men. And the reason that they might get fewer citations might be this choice of topic instead of their gender. And so we have to sort of deconfound the study of the impact of perceived gender on citations. So of course, the perfect experiment to actually get at this that would get around confounding would be to sort of randomly assign names to journal articles. So like randomly assign author names with names that are associated with different genders, for example, then wait for 10 years and see how many citations that these articles accumulated over time. But of course, that study is impossible to do. And so what we have to do instead is adjust for this confounding. What Melaniak et al. Did was they actually coded these articles, used these trip codings, which is like a huge project that already existed where they coded these articles into sort of many different categories, and then they controlled for these categories. So they looked, these trip codings basically have looked at all of these different articles, and they have them in categories like topic or approach or etc. And then they like controlled for these categories and adjusted for topic and for approach and for other types of content when looking at the relationship between gender and citations. And they found that the relationship still exists even when adjusting for this. And then they also controlled for many other things, like whether or not this person was, what kind of institution this person was, whether they had tenure, whether it was co-authored, etc. So well, we were inspired by this study because, of course, this trip hand coding of all of these articles into all of these different categories is really a heroic effort. This took like many, many research assistants. Actually, I think Rich and Brandon were both involved with this, you know, in graduate school. And so it took many, many different research assistants, a lot of money, right, to actually put this together. And so there's sort of two problems with hand coding. One is that it's really time consuming and resource intensive, right? You sometimes, if you want to put, you know, 3,000 articles into many different categories in IR, it's going to take a really long time. And the second is that you need to know the confounding categories ahead of time. So you need to know what are the important topics to code, what are the important approaches to code, and so you need to know what is going to be related both to the treatment and to the outcome ahead of time so that you can code these before before you do the analysis. So we were inspired to try to do this automatically, and so we wanted to know whether we can actually estimate the relevant topics to condition on in this type of analysis, and whether we could do this with text analysis. So we basically took Melaniak et al.'s data and we matched it to the full text of the journal articles. So this was over 3,000 different journal articles from the top 12 IR journals from 1980 to 2006. And we merged it with the Melaniak et al. Data so we could use their other variables, including what they had coded as gender, article age, tenure, etc. And the way we did this analysis is we were looking at how all female author teams, so whether authors or author teams that were all female, and comparing their citations to author teams that were either co-ed or all male. So our plan was basically to find similar articles one written by an all-female author team, the other written by either a co-ed or all-male team, similar in other ways in article age and in like the author's status, etc., and control for these text and non-text features in doing so, and then estimate with these matched articles how gender influences citations. So that's the motivation for this method. And so now I'm going to kind of get into the method itself, and then I'll come back later to the actual estimation of the impact. So text matching, text as a pre-treatment confounder is actually, once we thought about it, actually, there are a lot of instances where this happens, right? Surprisingly frequent problem. So of course, I just talked about, you know, in international relations, are women cited less frequently than men? The other application we consider in the paper that I'll talk a little bit about at the end is, does censorship change the behavior of social media users? So we might want to say, what is the impact of censorship on a future behavior of a social media user? If somebody gets their post taken down by a censor, then, you know, does that sort of deter them from posting more in the future or embolden them, et cetera? And the problem, of course, with that is that people who are censored look really different or write about different things than people who are not censored. So we'd have to match on the text of the post of a similar post that was censored, a similar post that was not censored, and look at and to make that, do that analysis. So we couldn't just compare posts and posting rates after censorship of censored and uncensored users, because they're really different on a lot of different dimensions. So the confounder in this case is the text that the users wrote before censorship. But there are lots of other applications where this is important. So you can imagine sort of controlling for letters of recommendation while looking at admissions decisions, controlling for trade treaties, controlling for congressional bills, controlling for legal case descriptions, police reports, et cetera. Like there's so many different ways that you could analyze this. But conditioning on high dimensional confounders is hard, and actually, existing method matching approaches don't sort of cover this. So you can't possibly condition on every single word. You can't find an exact match when there's text as a confounder, and you wouldn't want to. So in the IR example, right, you're not going to find an article that's exactly the same that has an all-female author team and a male or co-ed author team. And if you did find that, that would be a problem, because there'd be two of the same articles published in different by a different author team, right? So you want to be able to match on the things that are important. So we care really about controlling for covariates that are predictive of treatment, right? So in the gender and IR case, we want to control for covariates that predict gender, the author gender. And with text, if we just have a whole bunch of text, we don't always know what predicts treatment. So you might, if you study international relations, for example, you might come up with a few things that maybe women write about international relations differently than men do, but you might not actually be able to come up with all of those dimensions on top of your head, and actually using the data to estimate those would be really important. So when we started working on this a while ago, actually right when I started here at UCSD, and there was very little work on matching with high dimensional confounders, but I just wanted to let you know that there's now a lot of really great work on this, and there are a lot of computer scientists now working on this. So there's a few different review articles on this, so I'm just putting a few different citations here, but there are a lot of, this is the approach I'm going to talk about today is like not the only approach you can use, but I think this setup is important and is something that's also a contribution of this article. So the way that we do this is, that we set about doing this is we took current matching methods that in the low dimensional confounding case, and we sort of constructed analogs to these methods for text. So we looked at, for example, propensity score matching, and we said, okay, we can use multinomial inverse regression, which I'll talk about in just a second, as a way to do propensity score matching with text. And we thought about coarsened exact matching, and we say, oh, we can use topically coarsened exact matching as a way to do this with text. Then we figured out was that there were some real benefits of each of these approaches, and there were sort of drawbacks. So neither of these approaches really worked very well. And so we combined this and made a new method, which we call topical inverse regression matching, or TIRM, by sort of combining the good parts of both of them. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the time here is just do a quick review of matching for causal inference. I'm going to talk about both of how you can think about sort of analogs to current matching methods using text. I'm going to talk about topical inverse regression matching, and then I'm going to come back to the gender MNIR example and tell you about the results. So a quick review of matching. So the goal for matching is to condition on some X so that treatment is independent of the potential outcomes, right? So we want to basically get conditional ignorability. There are many approaches to doing this if you want to think about matching. You can, there is sort of propensity score matching, coarsened exact matching, genetic matching, like there's so many different sort of matching methods that you could use here. And today we're just going to mainly look at two of these strategies. One is propensity score matching. So this is creating a model where you predict treatment with some covariates, and you basically extract the probability of treatment from those covariates, and you match on that. And the other is trying to match on all X. Matching on all X is really hard, and so the coarsened exact matching approach to this is to coarsen X so that you can get exact matches. Both of these strategies scale poorly with high dimensional covariates like text, and so we're going to have to change them to make them work with text. So let's think about propensity score matching for text. So the idea behind propensity score matching is basically usually fit a logistic regression where you're trying to estimate the probability of treatment given the covariates that you think are confounding the relationship between treatment and outcome. And then you match units that have similar probability of treatment. So the really nice thing about propensity score matching is you're matching in the end by a scalar, just the predicted probability of treatment rather than the full X vector. So you're basically taking that big X, all of your different covariates, and you're condensing them, summarizing them with how they, the probability of treatment. The cons of this is it sort of approximates full randomization rather than more efficient block randomization. So sorry, my screen just went funny. Basically, you can be more efficient if you match more closely on X rather than just matching on the probability of treatment. This is also propensity score matching. There's also a problem with high dimensional confounders. So when your X matrix is N by V, where N is your number of documents and V is the number of words in your vocabulary. If you think about this in a text as data setting, you often have tons and tons and tons of different words in your vocabulary. And if those are all of your covariates, it's difficult to estimate this probability of treatment because especially in the case where V is greater than N, which we do see sometimes. So you can only estimate the probability of treatment when N is much greater than V, which often isn't the case with text. So what we use instead is this method developed by Cook and Taddy, basically called multinomial inverse regression. So the idea is this is like an inverse regression. So instead of regressing treatment on X, we're going to regress X on treatment. So we take X, those are the counts of words within each of our documents, and we model this as a multinomial drawing from Q, where Q is a function of treatment status. And so this coefficient here is measuring the relationship between treatment and the word. And so we can take this coefficient and we can multiply it for each document by the amount those words appear within the document. So take all of the coefficients estimated for the relationship between treatment and each word, and then multiply that by the amount that word appears within each document. And then you get a projection for each document that basically is kind of like that propensity score, which allows you to say, contains the information about how related the words are within that document to treatment. Okay, and so what you can do is you can match on this ZI, or you can actually project this onto a probability if you want to, but you can match on that ZI. It's very similar to propensity score matching. The problem that we found doing this is that texts that are equally likely to be treated were not always semantically similar. So this is very similar to this sort of King and Nielsen critique of propensity scores, is that you would get these texts that would be matched, but they actually wouldn't, even though they'd have a similar probability of treatment according to the model, they wouldn't actually be semantically similar. And so this isn't a problem in expectation, but in the text case, we really want to assess if our matches are working, because text analysis is just like a very simplified version of the real world. We're just using like this bag of words counts approach. We like to actually look at the documents that we match and say, yes, this is a good match, right? And we weren't able to do that in the propensity score case. So we like something that actually would make matches a bit more similar. So the other way that we thought about doing this was using sort of an analog to a coarsened exact matching approach. So the idea behind coarsened exact matching is that you can coarsen each variables into sort of natural categories. So say that you take like years of education, if you can't match exactly on exact number of years of education because you don't have enough, you wouldn't have enough matches, you could match instead on coarsened bins of that variable. So you can match on high school or elementary school or college, and then if you got exact matches on those, you'd have really similar matches. And the nice thing about this is it bounds imbalance between matches on each variable. So in our case, though, it's hard to understand how we would coarsen words, right? So usually in coarsened exact matching, you're coarsening within a particular covariate. But if like, say my word is international or something, but I have counts like 0 through 6 of the number of times this appears within a document, I could coarsen to like 0 and 1, but that's actually not going to really help me because my problem is I have too many covariates rather than two sort of granular covariates, right? So there are thousands of variables, and even if we coarsened within each of those variables, we would still not have exact matches. So that's the issue. So what we think about instead is like, okay, well, can we do something that's like, instead of where we coarsen across variables instead of within variables? So we thought about doing this by using a topic model. So the innovation here is coarsening across words. So say that you grouped all words like tax, income, and tariff into a category called economics, then you can match on economics rather than matching on each of those individual words. So you could do this by estimating a topic model, right, where you're sort of grouping words and then you're putting documents in as a proportion into each of those topics, and then match on the topics rather than matching on all of the different words. This can get you really semantically similar documents, which is really useful. The problem is that topics aren't always an important predictor of treatment. So the great thing about propensity score matching and the multinomial inverse regression is you're actually getting out information about which words are predictive of treatment. The problem with the great thing about topic modeling is you're getting semantically similar matches. So we wanted something that combined both of those advantages in one method. So we wanted something that sort of bounds and balance between matched documents, but doesn't leave out important words that are relevant to treatment. So we created this method called Topical Inverse Regression Matching, which sort of jointly estimates both the probability of treatment and the topic density. And then we match on the topic proportions within each document and also the topic specific probability of treatment for each word. So this has topical bounding properties. It gets documents that are very similar to each other. But it also estimates which words are associated with treatment. So you're going to get sort of the important words in this model as well. So you can actually do this with the structural topic model, which is something that Brandon and I have worked on for a long time. And if you use treatment as a content covariate in the structural topic model, which I'll go over in a second, then you can get out both the topic specific probability of treatment and the topic proportions from the model and match on those using your whatever matching method you prefer. So before I kind of get into TIRM, I'm just going to do like a very quick review of topic models, and just so you kind of have the components that go into TIRM, and then I'll tell you about TIRM. So I think that the two sort of matrices that you have to remember with all topic models, or most topic models, I shouldn't say all because there are a lot of different kinds, but most topic models are two matrices. And this is true for STM and LDA and sort of topic models in this genre, is the topical prevalence matrix and the topical content matrix, okay? So these are the two sort of main outputs of the model. So the topical prevalence matrix is, I'm going to call theta, is a D by K matrix. So it's the number of documents that you have within your corpus by the number of topics, K, which is something that you give to the model. And in our case, K would be larger if you want more granular matches. K would be smaller if you want less granular matches. And so what topic models are going to estimate is the proportion of each document in each of these K topics. So here the rows are going to sum to 1. Okay, so you're going to every document has a certain amount of it in each topic. And the other thing that topic models are estimating is what we call the topical content matrix, which I'm going to use beta for. And beta is V by K, where V is the number of words within the vocabulary. So for all words in the whole vocabulary of your corpus, beta is going to estimate the probability that each of those words is drawn in a given topic. Okay, so topics are probability distributions over words. If I say you're talking about international relations, there's some words that you're more likely to say than if you're talking about gardening or something else, right? And so each topic is when I say that you're talking in a given topic, you have a certain probability of drawing these certain words. You can think about it that way. So the columns here are going to sum to 1. Okay. So in the Leighton-Dirichlet allocation, basically this theta, this topical prevalence matrix, is drawn from a Dirichlet distribution. And this, and what the basic idea behind this, I'm actually going to put this all up here. And then beta is also drawn from a Dirichlet. And then what you do is using theta, the topical prevalence matrix, for every word within your document, you assign each word to a particular topic. And then depending on what topic that's assigned to, you you use the beta matrix to draw the final word that you would use within the document. So this is the model for how words are generated within documents in the latent Dirichlet allocation. This is sort of like the basic topic model, if you want to think about it that way. In the structural topic model, what we do is we add structure to the latent Dirichlet allocation using a prior. So we put a prior we replace this Dirichlet prior for beta with information about the covariates, and we replace this Dirichlet prior for theta with information about the covariates. So documents are allowed to sort of have a different topic proportion. That topical prevalence matrix is going to be a function. It's going to be drawn from a function of the covariates that we for a given document. And topics themselves, the way that a topic is talked about, can also be a function of the covariates, like the covariates for each individual document. So in particular for TIRM, what's important is that the probability of saying a given word, given that you're in a particular topic and a particular document, is going to be a function not only of the topic that you are in, but also a covariate related to the document. And in TIRM, this is going to be treatment. So what we're going to do with a structural topic model is we're going to estimate the probability that you say a word is going to be a function both of the topic that you have drawn for that word from your topical prevalence matrix, but also by whether or not that document was treated. And these kappas here are these coefficients we're estimating. And this in particular, this kappa C is going to tell us how much a word is related to treatment, and kappa int here is going to tell us, this is the interaction between topic and the covariate, how much that word is related to treatment within a particular topic. And so this is very similar to multinomial inverse regression. This is giving us information about how much any word is related to treatment, and it's allowing us to do this within the topic context, which is really like the cool thing here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to estimate STM with topic as a content covariate. So treatment as a content covariate. So treatment is going to change the way in which topics are talked about. So we're going to estimate the relationship between treatment and that topical content matrix, that beta matrix. And we're going to match on that theta matrix, the estimated topic proportion. So we're going to make sure that our match documents talk about the topics the same amount, but we're also going to match on a projection that's a function of those kappas I just talked about. So we're going to take the amount that each document is using each word X, and we're going to multiply it by that kappa. And that is going to be very similar to that projection in multinomial inverse regression. Is going to give us a projection of how much that document is related to treatment. And we could either do this with a covariate only projection with just kappa with the covariate and not kappa with the interaction, or we can also do this summing over topics with using the information about the interaction between topics and treatment. You can also then add any other covariates that you think are important. So here, this theta matrix is capturing the substance of the documents, how much they talk about the topic. Then the projection's talking about how much that document's related to treatment. And then this last one is any other covariates you think might also confound the relationship between treatment and the outcome. You can match on all of those. You can use whatever matching method that you want to match on all of those, and then get a matched set of documents where you're able to do your analysis. So that's like the idea behind TIRM. So of course, there are lots of limitations of TIRM. So first of all, you need all of the things that you need when you do matching or any type of causal inference. Generally, you require a SUPVA assumption. You make sure that there's no interference between your units. You need to have all of the relevant covariates that to obtain conditional ignorability. You also need with TIRM that you're sort of relying on a parametric method to reduce the dimension. So you're relying that this method, this topic modeling method and the projection is actually retaining all of the important information that you need in order to obtain conditional ignorability. So the projection, the sort of reducing the dimension of all of your covariates doesn't lose important information about confounding. So one of the ways that we have found that to be really useful when doing topic matching is to look at a lot of different balance metrics. So once we have our match document set, we can look at the balance of words associated with treatment. So if we look initially at which words are most predictive of treatment, after we match, do we see those differences go down at least or go away ideally? We also want to look at balance on the topic. So we want to make sure before treatment, we might see a big difference between, before matching, we might see a big difference between the treated and control documents on topics. After matching, we should see that difference go away for the most part. And then we also use in the paper, we also use string kernel similarity. So we look at similarity metrics that take into account word order, and we make sure that the match increases the similarity between treated and control documents. Then the last thing you can do is do human comparisons. You can use, you can select random matches and have RAs or yourself look at them. And of course, this is easier for tweets and harder for something longer like novels, but you can evaluate the similarity of matched pairs relative to random pairs or other things like that. So I'm going to go back to that, just making sure I'm not doing okay on time. I'm going to go back to that example of gender bias in citations to sort of and apply this method. So just to review, Melania, Powers, and Walter found that women get cited less than men in political science, but of course, women write about different topics than men in political science, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. The Melania-Gala solution is to use the trip coding to condition on these different categories, and what we're going to do is see if we can do this with automated methods, text matching. So we're going to get those over 3,000 journal articles from the top 12 IR journals, the text of these articles. And then we get lots of different variables from by merging this with the Melania data. And we look at how the treatment, all female author teams versus control, co-ed, or all male author teams impact citations after matching. So we're going to find similar articles using text matching and see how they are cited differently. So this is just to give you an idea what this is. I don't know why my computer is like not liking this right now. This is the difference on the x-axis. This is the difference in proportion of all female articles minus male or co-ed articles. This is on the y-axis is the mutual information in the unmatched data set. So for every single word on this, these words up here have the highest mutual information. So they have a lot of information about whether or not they were written by a man or an all-female team versus a male co-ed team. So interview, woman, commission. There's sort of more these words are going to be more used by all female author teams, and these words are going to be more used by male and co-ed author teams. And so what our goal with text matching is to reduce the difference between these words. And my program has stopped responding. So hold on, I'm just going to stop sharing and give me a second. Force quit this. Back.
No worries. It's almost as if it were deliberate to increase the suspense.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. It's increasing the suspense. I think it doesn't like the I'm just actually going to skip that because I think that's what it's hanging up on. Okay, then I'm going to go back to sharing screen. What would a Zoom talk be without some technical difficulties, right? So Okay, so can you guys see that now? Awesome. Okay, so if you look, so I'm going to skip the word thing because I think that's what I was hanging up on. I'm going to go to topical differences. So this is the mean topic difference, but this is between all female author teams or male and co-ed author teams. And these boxes are the full data set. These are 15 topics that the topic model estimated. And you can see these are the topics that are more likely to be written by all female author teams. And these are the topics that'll be more likely to be written by all male author teams. So model, theory, behavior, nuclear, military, defense. These are more game, cooperation, strategy, variable, model, democracy, data. These are more likely to be written by all male author teams or co-ed. These are more likely international politics, trade, international economy, China, country, world, developing, institution, international. These are more likely to be written by all female author teams. So then you can match based on different in the filled in dots is term matching, and how you can see that for the most part it's decreasing the differences between topics, although we still have some differences. You can match, if you just match on the projection, actually you don't really decrease the differences between topics very much. If you match on the topics, these are the triangles, of course you decrease the differences between topics quite a bit. And then we also have human coded matching. So if you match based on the human coded categories, you actually get sort of similar, a little bit worse than term, but similar decrease in the differences between categories. We also look at string kernel similarity. So this is the distribution of pairs of documents and their similarity. No match is this distribution here. So you see that the string kernel similarity is like around 0.75. But then once you match on term, you can get this to be a much higher similarity between the documents. And we also show that we can reduce human coded differences doing term matching. So this is the difference between the all female author teams and male co-ed author teams for these different hand-coded categories. So if you see like the biggest differences in this qualitative category for the hand-coded articles is that women were much more likely to have a qualitative method. And using term, we reduce that difference by quite a bit. We also reduce the difference in quantitative. We also reduce the difference in international security. And so we can, even on the human coded, we can do a better than not matching, even if we look at human coded differences, which are not something we took into account at all using our automated matching. So we do the matching, and then MNIR et al. Find that women receive 80% of citations of men. We find that women receive fewer citations, and we do this matching with a lot of different levels of granularity. So we take the topic proportions, we take the projection, we take all these other covariates, we match on them at like sort of a very high level of or low level of granularity all the way to a high level of granularity, and we look at the results across all of those different matches. We find this is women receive fewer citations, robust across all of these different specifications. Our estimate, like our preferred estimate is women, like with our best match, we think is women receive 65% of citations of men, but it's pretty similar to what MNIR et al. Find. This difference is very high, is in very high expected citation counts. So there is actually a much lower difference between men and women for less cited articles, but it's really being driven by these highly cited articles. That's where the difference we found is lying. I'm just also going to summarize, there's another application within the paper on social media censorship, and I'm going to summarize that as well. So we also in the paper use term to match censored and uncensored posts from Sina Weibo. So this is a social media platform in China. We get information about whether or not these posts were censored or not censored. And then we match for all posts that were written on the same day. We take all of the censored posts and we find matches to those censored posts. So posts that are very similar to the censored posts, but were not censored. using TIRM. And I think we can think of these as censorship mistakes for the most part. Like these are posts that we match with high granularity. So we find posts that are very, very similar. They're sometimes even reposts or, related to the very, very same topic, but somehow they weren't censored. So these, the posts are very similar. We also match on the previous censorship history of the censored and uncensored user. We match on a whole bunch of other covariates about the user. What we find is, we look at so then with those matched posts, we take the users who are matched and the users who are not matched, and we look at the impact of being censored on future censorship rate. And then we also look at the impact of censorship on future post rate. So if you get censored, are you more likely to be censored in the future? And if you get censored, are you less likely to post on social media in the future, maybe because you're self-censoring, for example? So we find actually a very significant increase on future censorship. So even matching on the past censorship history of 2 users, if you are censored, you are much more likely to be censored in the future than if you were not censored. And we think that this is coming from that censored users we think are flagged for the future. And we also can back this up with some qualitative evidence as well, but that if you get censored, you sort of enter into, you're more likely to sort of be under scrutiny in the future and get censored again. We find no decrease in post rate for censored users. So we don't find a difference between censored and uncensored users, even matching for their past post rate, matching on the text of the censored post. We don't find a decrease in their future post rate. So we don't see that there's like a self-censorship effect going on. So in conclusion, there are lots of applications that measure pre-treatment confounders with text. We propose sort of a new framework to show that we can match on both the topical density estimate of those pre-treatment confounders. This bounds the differences between topics, between matched and unmatched articles. And then we match on the probability of treatment as well. And this balances on words related to treatment, and that this is best for overall balance. In future work, we'd love to extend this to other high dimensional cases other than text, like images or other types of high dimensional confounding that might not be text. So thanks so much. Look forward to hearing your comments and questions. Yes.
Molly, thank you. That is really fascinating, incredible work. I want to ask for questions. Can you just put your little hand up if you are to begin asking? Hendrik Ertz. And my apologies for mangling whatever language your name is in.
No problem. Thank you. And thanks for this wonderful talk. I have a question because I'm currently working also with your structural topic models for my own work. But one thing I was always curious about, because I'm currently like really getting into topic models and how these work, is if you have text as this kind of very high dimensional data, the question is, we also have stuff like word embeddings, which also already transform them into kind of these numbers with which you can do sometimes more elegant calculations in order to reduce the dimensionality and work with it. And my question is somehow, what would be your intuition, given that you have these 2 things, what you can do? Like what would be the possibilities of using this frequentist approach as opposed to this Bayesian approach, more or less? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a few models that combine word embeddings and topic models. So word embeddings I think of as like a different way of representing text than the one that I was discussing here, which was using a bag of words model. So instead of having the count for every document representing the document as the count of the number of times that word appears within that document, word embeddings is sort of representing each word as training it on a large data set typically, representing each word is in a really high dimensional space, sometimes like 100 to 300. And then you can take all of the words within a particular text, and then you can represent that document within this space, for example. So there are a lot of real advantages. So I think a few different thoughts here. So I think the advantage of using topic modeling sometimes is the interpretability. So it's easy if you have like a cluster of words within a topic to how to figure out what that topic is about. If topics are in the word embedding space, then you have to sort of like back out what that means. If I'm in some place in a 100-dimensional space, I have to figure out like what words are close to that. I mean, that's doable, but it's maybe just a little bit more complicated on interpretation. The benefit of using word embeddings, of course, is you can use a lot of information outside of just the words within your corpus. You can often use information about words within all of Wikipedia or like all of the different, to get more leverage on which words are similar to each other. And that can be particularly helpful for like rare words, for example, which you might only see like once within your data. And so you can't really figure out like where they are close, what other word they're close to. But if you have information from an outside corpus, then you could do that. So in the bag of words approach, right, like bus is equally similar to car as it is to flower, right? And that is kind of not really true. Like in the word embedding approach, you actually get some of that information, right? I think that there's in the work I was mentioning in computer science, looking at text matching, there's some approaches which are basically modeling the probability of treatment using a much more complicated predictive model based on deep learning, right? So I think that that's another way you could do this, and you could match documents in the word embedding space to each other. And I think that's another way. Like, there's so many ways to get at text similarity to predict treatment. I think that what we're trying to do here is sort of like create a framework for thinking about some of the trade-offs with matching based on content, matching based on a predictive model. How do you think about, and then how do you go in and assess those matches and see if they're done well? But yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways to do this. I think that's a really good question.
So Molly, I'm going to ask a question that is based on the topic you spoke about, not the method.
For sure.
Which of course is the very discouraging findings you report about citation of women. Mm-hmm. So I want to first make sure I understood correctly and then ask you a question. So women work within international relations, women work on somewhat different topics than men. But even if they work on the same topic, the people who knock it out of the park, to use a baseball metaphor, who really get highly cited work are much more likely to be men. Women find it much more difficult to do really highly cited work. Everybody, both men and women, or all female and male teams, can do ignored work with equal probability or low cited work with equal probability. But the really highly cited work is by men. So that being the case, if you were advising the American Political Science Association or a department on how to interpret citation counts, given the fact that it's historically been very hard for women to become very highly prominent, what would you advise? I know that's really out of your area of expertise, but I assume that having done this work, you've thought about it a little.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that with all metrics for evaluating the quality of someone's work, you have to sort of take into account what you're trying to actually measure with that metric and the ways in which that metric might fall short of that measure. So I think we see this also with teaching evaluations, for example, how much, which have also been shown to have gender bias. We're trying to measure quality of teaching, but we're proxying it with something else. So I think that we always sort of have to think about whether or not a metric we're using is actually measuring something about quality or something about, or if it's actually also capturing other things like a network or, sort of like the availability of a person in our mind when we're writing a paper, right? And I think there have been some really great efforts for people to sort of be aware when they're writing papers about their own biases and kind of looking at their, especially when writing review papers or writing other papers, looking at their bibliography, their works cited, and trying to say, am I sort of thinking about certain people more than others in a way that's not a reflection of the quality of their work, but rather, a reflection of my network or my, and so I think that there have been some really great discussions about that. I think that would be, continuing to have those discussions is really important. So, yeah.
Thank you. In the chat, someone suggested it might be possible to use weights by gender to correct for, let's call them for network effects. What would you think of that?
I haven't really thought about that, but I mean, so this is, I guess, sort of similar. Like you could upweight certain citations given, I think if I were trying to assess the quality of someone's work, I think if knowing that there's this difference in citation, I would try to assess that quality from, instead of just reweighting, I would try to assess quality through some other way, like reading their work or, so that's, I think that would be my, I would probably want to do that rather than trying to correct for it without having a way to validate that. I think with this generally, like, having, this is actually kind of a measurement problem, right? Like, how do we assess quality? What do we mean by quality, right? And if we're using citations as a proxy for that, then, which is kind of what you're thinking about in the APSA context, or like, then, we could sit down and like create a definition of that and actually, read it and just evaluate that in a different way.
Maybe. Let me ask you a tougher question then. I think that you can read articles to know if they're really good or not. Correcting for quality is not as hard. But if what you're trying to do is measure influence and impact, and you find that women apparently have had their ability to have a lot of impact, that's been curtailed. How would you, is there any way to adjust for that?
I mean, I think that some ways you would want to, so how can we sort of increase the opportunities for women to have, to get their work out there in the field? I think, inviting female speakers or putting women on syllabi, like these types of things, like, thinking about how to sort of like increase the accessibility of conferences to more diverse scholars, a diverse group of scholars. Like, I think those are all ways to sort of increase impact. Also thinking about like being intentional about thinking about like our own networks and our own both mentorship and collaboration networks, right? I think those are things that, creating policies that, I think that one of the things that this has made me reflect on is trying to sort of how do we decrease this gap in the future, right? And I think that's one of the things I've thought about.
Thank you. We can't go back and correct the past, but
That's true.
We can try to use this information to change the future. And presumably that's also true for your work on China. So I want to thank you very much for this. It has really been a pleasure to hear about your work. And I'm sure that people are using the kinds of techniques that you presented in their own work and will probably reach out to you afterwards with questions for how to do things or get your advice on stuff. So I hope you won't mind. Our next speaker will be February 9th. That will be the next Civica Data Seminar Series, Speed Talk. We will have Alex Scacco from the VZB speaking. And actually, Natalia, you may know the topic. I don't remember the topic.
Yeah, it's on migration, but exact.
Okay. Thank you. So to everyone else, stay healthy, stay inside. I hope that we're all freer to go outside in another month when we see each other again. Molly, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks you all for coming.